Uh, we're going to try and keep the focus on the children.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. For a very long time, UK Column has been covering many stories on children, whether it be child abuse, child trafficking, slavery, and pregnant women. And I can't possibly cover all the stories and atrocities that are affecting women and children around the world today, but I would like to cover just a few. But I'm hearing the word humanity, humanitarian, all of the time. It kind of slips off the tongue. And I just wanted to remind people what the word humanitarian means. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, humanitarian, involved in or connected with improving people's lives and reducing suffering. The definition of inhumane, however, is cruel to people or animals in not caring about their suffering or about the conditions under which they live. The definition of a child is a person from the time of birth until he or she is an adult, or a son or daughter of any age. And most countries that we'll be referring to are countries that classify children as under the age of 18. And an adult, a person or animal that has grown to full size and strength. And I'd just like to remind people too of an interview that we did very recently with Dr. Ros Jones, retired consultant paediatrician, that we called Suffer the Little Children, because we discussed lockdowns, the effects of lockdowns on children, the vaccination programme on children all around the world, and what were the effects. And it's not really that long ago, if we cast our mind back just 3 years, where children were sitting in circles in the playground or sitting apart from one another in the classroom, masked. And the effects, the psychological effects on our children, the Don't Kill Granny campaign that went on. So when I look at the abuse and the torture that many children are going through, one can't help to be. I was surprised to learn that over 40% of the population of Gaza are children. Children. Some people say that it's 42%, but that's still a huge, huge figure, 40% of children. And the only story that I could find, I'm very sad to say, on the net that was covering children in both Israel and Gaza was ABC News, who say the horrendous toll on children caught in the Israel and Gaza conflict. And it really is horrific. So let's just look at some of the images, or a couple of the images from that article in ABC News. This is a little Palestinian girl crying during the funeral of Amir Ghanan, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the buildings in Khan Yunis, Gaza Strip, on October the 10th. Similarly, let's have a look at a picture of a little Israeli girl who's absolutely terrified, waking up to the sound of incoming rockets fired from the Gaza Strip. These children are terrified. And if we go to the Middle East, we can see that over 1,000 Palestinian children, as of this report, and that's not taking into account the absolutely horrific attack last night on the hospital, which I know Mike will be talking about in a minute. 1,000 children have been killed in Gaza. And it's not just physical harm, it's also psychological harm. And the article goes on to say that many of these children have been used to listening to airstrikes. They've grown up in it. They were born in it, and the repercussions are huge. And I was struck by the Palestinian politician Aida Tulma Sliman, who said no child, neither Jew nor Palestinian, is guilty, and that no child should be a victim of this blood cycle. The emotional repercussions for these children are profound, and they really are profound. And if we go to the next slide, we can see an extremely distraught dad. This is Yuri David, overcome with emotion during a press conference in Israel as his 2 daughters, aged 5 and 3, and his wife were taken hostage to Gaza. And in the next slide, the BBC are reporting that in hospital, and this is one of the bigger hospitals, this is the Al-Shifa hospital, this is the biggest hospital in Gaza, 120 are intubated in intensive care. Many of them are neonates. And this is a picture of a little girl in intense pain. And her relatives died and her house was destroyed. But it's not just children and it's not just babies, it's also pregnant women. And CNN were covering this story, a report from ActionAid. And I was actually quite shocked to understand that there are 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza as we speak, trapped in Gaza. There are 5,000 pregnant women due to give birth this month. That's 200 a day, 200 a day. And where do they go? They go nowhere. There's no hygiene, there's no water, there's nothing. And as CNN World say, the healthcare system itself in Gaza is critical. It's under attack, on the brink of collapse. And these pregnant women that we're seriously concerned about have nowhere to go. They're facing unthinkable challenges, Alan said in an interview with CNN on Sunday. And it's not just the children in Israel. It's not just the children in Palestine. It's also the children of Ukraine. And there are children all over the world, and the children in Ukraine have been suffering. They've been displaced. They've been orphaned. They've been traumatized. And if we go to the next slide, you can freeze the screen to see some of the problems that affect the children in Ukraine. In fact, I think there's a couple of slides. Please feel free to freeze the screen. But we're talking corporal punishment. We're talking discrimination. We're talking 8% of Ukrainian children are working in prostitution or pornography. And it's not just Ukraine either. It's just recently in Afghanistan, they had their third huge earthquake, which has now killed over 2,400. 90% of these that have died are women and children, innocent women and children. And the reason being that many were out. The men were out in the field when the earthquake took place, and it was the women and children that were at home. And so this has caused enormous devastation. This is affecting women, children, and babies, all innocent, all around the world. And just before we jump to Mike's section on the hospital, I just want to put the health system into perspective a little bit. So in Gaza, there are 30 hospitals and clinics. 13 are run by the Ministry of Health. The rest are private and are run by NGOs. The United Nations and the WHO have been working with the Palestinian Ministry of Health, as have the World Bank Education and Health and Rehabilitation Project. Thus far, there have been 34 attacks on healthcare facilities, and there have been 11 WHO health workers killed and 16 injured. The biggest hospital in Gaza is the Al-Shifa, which has 500 beds. That's the largest, and apparently there's reports coming from there to say that ventilators are being switched off to make room for the wounded. The hospital that was affected last night, which I know Mike's coming on to now, the Al-Ahli Hospital, has 80 beds, and the name means the Arab People's Hospital. So that's just to put it in context a little bit. Children and babies, all innocent.
Yes, and Debbie, this hospital was a Christian hospital.
Yes, it was. It was founded in 1882 by the Church Mission Society, Church of England, and it's now managed by the Episcopal Church of Jerusalem.
Indeed. So the question is, what happened there? So, well, here is a little bit of the footage showing the aftermath. Clearly, some huge explosion has taken place there. The narrative on this, it is developing narrative, and the Israelis are absolutely denying at this point that they had anything to do with it. They are claiming that it was the result of a rocket which misfired.
From the Hamas side.
Well, it was from the Islamic Jihad, but right. In any case, this was one of the videos that was sent out on Twitter. A press conference amongst piles of murdered and massacred Palestinians, is the tweet saying. I've never seen anything like this before. And it's, we're talking hundreds of dead here and so on. So the question is, what happened? Well, I want to start off just by having a look at one of the early BBC reports and see what they were reporting at the time.
The Israeli military has been contacted for comment, and they have said that they are investigating. But, it is hard to see what else this could be, really, given the size of the explosion, other than an Israeli airstrike or several airstrikes. Because, when we've seen rockets being fired out of Gaza, we never see explosions of that scale. We might see half a dozen, maybe a few more people being killed in such rocket attacks, but we've never seen anything on the scale of the sort of explosion on the video I was watching earlier, which, as you say, is still to be verified.
Okay, so that was an early BBC report. Here is an early, later than the BBC report, but this is MSNBC and what they were saying.
Well, this is an absolutely classic fog of war situation, and we should be really clear. NBC News is not able to get into Gaza right now. The Israeli border is sealed. The Egyptian border is sealed. Our teams are not able to get there and to verify this directly. We should also say that the Israeli military at this point is not providing any evidence to back up its claims that this was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket. They are citing intelligence that they have not yet made public. We should also say that this kind of death toll is not what you normally associate with Palestinian rockets. These rockets are dangerous. They are deadly. They do not tend to kill hundreds of people in a single strike in the.
And, you know, this is a valid point. This is something that has to be considered. So when Israel is saying that this was a failed rocket launch, we've got to ask how this scale of devastation happened as a result of that. But here is a tweet which is being pushed out by Hanania Naftali, who is, I believe, Netanyahu's deputy media advisor. So this is a journalist who gives advice to Netanyahu. And he tweeted this out yesterday, saying, breaking, Israeli Air Force struck a Hamas terrorist base inside a hospital in Gaza. A multiple number of terrorists are dead. It's heartbreaking that Hamas is launching rockets from hospitals, mosques, schools, and using civilians as human shields. That tweet was subsequently deleted. And he then said earlier today, I shared a report that was published on Reuters. Well, he didn't mention Reuters in the tweet, so I'm not sure about that. And he said about the bombing at the hospital in Gaza, which falsely stated Israel struck the hospital. I mistakenly shared this information in a since deleted post, which I referred Hamas' routine use of hospitals to store weapons caches and conduct terrorist activity. I apologize for this error. So, you know, what do we make of this, Brian? I don't know what thoughts you might have on it.
Well, it still needs a lot more investigation. But of course, the principal problem I see is that an independent investigation is extremely unlikely to take place because nobody can get into the Gaza area. So what are we to rely on? BBC says it's going to use its fact-checking team to tell us what the truth is. Well, I don't have any faith in that. I don't trust the reports that we're getting in at the moment. But I think I'm going to come back to Debbie's start point, which is at the end of the day, we've got more people and children killed, and what should be happening from UK and the US and Israel and across the world, and including the Strip, is that there should be a ceasefire and the hostilities stopped. That's what's needed.
Okay, so then a tweet out this morning this is from Al Jazeera. Breaking news, urgent, Israeli army spokesman, we bombed the hospital garage, but there were no direct hits on the hospital. So all kinds of stuff coming out from the Israeli side that have been subsequently walked back on, it seems, if we believe what the mainstream media is saying and their reports. Here is Shira Frankel. Now, we've got to be careful because this point here is, this is why verification matters. Now, the tweet that she's referring to here has been taken down, but because the person or the account was claiming to be Al Jazeera. Now, the previous tweet that I showed you was from an official Al Jazeera account. This was not an official Al Jazeera account. The person was claiming to be from Al Jazeera, but that was not the case, and so on. In the meantime, the rhetoric from the Israelis continues to ramp up. This was yesterday at 7 p.m. As long as Hamas does not release the hostages into its hands, the only thing that needs to enter Gaza are hundreds of tons of explosives from the Air Force, not an ounce of humanitarian aid. So look, I'm just going to say, you know, in the time that we've got today, we can't cover this in any more detail. If you want to see how the narrative has developed, we've got to appreciate that the electronic intifada is coming from a Palestinian point of view, but nonetheless, this particular blog post has captured many of the comments and tweets from the media, from politicians and so on, and has showing how the narrative has developed. If you want to go and have a look at that and follow this. But as just to put my voice to this as well, this conflict has to stop, and it's time for some kind of negotiations to take place before this escalates any further. Too many people are dying, and later on we'll be talking about the efforts for peace, if there are any. And then just to end this segment here, just to mention that Zelensky is not doing his begging trip to Israel after all, because the Israelis have decided it's not the right time. I'm not sure that it's ever the right time, but there you go.
No, but we must add that, of course, some unrest in Ukraine, because it's going to become more difficult for them to get support, while particularly the American attention is focused on Israel. But let's move on through. We're going to have a little